Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is Monday, February 2nd, 2026.
And if you're looking at the weather in Minneapolis right now, it is just brutal out there.
Brutal is the word. We're talking a high of maybe 4 degrees below zero. It's that kind of deep, lung-freezing cold that normally just shuts a city down.
Yeah, you expect everyone to be huddled inside, under blankets, just waiting for the snow plows to finally come through.
But the footage coming out of the Twin Cities today, it tells a completely different story. The streets, they aren't empty at all.
Not even close. They're full of people. They're full of armored vehicles.
And the city itself is radiating this just incredible high-friction heat. It's a complete paradox.
It really is. The weather is literally freezing, but let's call it the geopolitical temperature of the city is boiling over. We're looking at a friction point that I honestly don't think we've seen in modern American history.
And the name for that friction point is Operation Metro Surge. Now, if you're just, scrolling through headlines on your phone, you've probably seen the buzzwords.
Oh, sure. Crackdown, protests.
Clashes. Maybe you saw a quick clip of the National Guard on TikTok or something?
Right, the 15-second version.
Exactly. But today, the mission here is to slow all of that down. We really need to move past the shouting matches you see on cable news and actually look at the documents on the table.
To get into the granularity of it all.
We have some incredible on-the-ground reporting from The Guardian. We've got the full text of the class action lawsuit filed by the ACLU against DHS Secretary Kristi Noem.
And we also have a very dense, and I have to say, a very disturbing analysis from the Center for Ethics and the Rule of Law. It's about a simulation they ran back in 2024.
And that simulation is absolutely key, isn't it? Because what we are seeing play out in Minneapolis, all this Civil War rhetoric, it's not just hyperbole anymore.
No, it's not. The very experts who ran these war games 2 years ago are looking at the news from Minneapolis today, and they're basically saying, this is it. This is exactly what we predicted would happen.
So here's the plan for this deep dive. We're going to try to understand the granular reality of life under what the city council is now openly calling an occupation.
We're not just going to say people are mad. We want to know why they're mad. What does that look like day to day?
And we're going to look at the specific legal claims being made in federal court. We want to look at the sworn affidavits, not the tweets.
The actual evidence being presented.
And finally, we need to answer this massive question. How did what was supposedly a fraud investigation spiral so completely out of control that it led to a general strike, the deaths of U.S. citizens, and now a literal standoff between the United States Army and the Minnesota National Guard?
It's a constitutional crisis playing out in real time.
So let's start at the beginning, or at least the beginning of this specific chapter. What exactly is Operation Metro Surge? Because when this was first announced, it wasn't pitched as a big immigration crackdown, was it?
No, not at all. If you go back and look at the initial press briefings from the administration, this was late 2025, the stated goal was something very different.
What were they saying then?
They cited widespread fraud in social services. They were specifically pointing to certain nonprofits in the Twin Cities area.
No.
So the justification was, we need to send in federal investigators to audit these systems.
Okay, so it was framed as a bureaucratic cleanup operation.
Exactly. Which, sounds pretty boring on its face, something that most people wouldn't even pay attention to.
Right. But then the boots hit the ground.
And the scale of it just changed instantly. The Trump administration mobilized approximately 3,000 federal agents to Minnesota.
Okay, I want to stop on that number for a second. 3,000. Can you contextualize that for us? Is that a normal size for an audit team?
No, it's completely unheard of. To give you some sense of the sheer density of this force, the Minneapolis Police Department, at full strength, might have around 600 to 800 officers. It varies a bit.
So you're saying there's a federal force in the city that outnumbers the entire local police department by, what, roughly 5 to 1?
At least 5 to 1. 5 federal badges for every 1 local badge. And that fundamentally alters the reality on the ground.
And then these aren't, I'm guessing, auditors in suits carrying calculators and clipboards.
Not in the slightest. The reports we're reading describe tactical units. You've got ICE, you've got Border Patrol BORTAC units, which are their elite tactical teams, DHS rapid response teams, the whole 9 yards.
So heavily armed.
Heavily armed, often masked, driving in unmarked SUVs. And here's the crucial part. Because they are federal agents, They are operating entirely outside the jurisdiction of the mayor or the city council.
They don't answer to anyone in
They
Minneapolis.
answer to Washington,
Yep.
and that's it. And that's where that occupation dynamic Angela Conley was talking about comes from.
Right. She's a Hennepin County commissioner, and she said, and this is a direct quote, "Make no mistake, this is an occupation."
And when you first hear that, you might think, okay, that's a politician using strong language for effect.
But then you look at the descriptions of what daily life has become.
And you realize it's not an exaggeration. It's the ubiquity of it. This isn't just a one-off raid on a specific warehouse or business.
No, the ACLU filing lists incidents happening everywhere, at grocery stores, outside of churches, at bus stops during the morning commute.
It's a dragnet. It's designed to be visible and intimidating. And when you saturate a mid-sized American city with 3,000 federal agents, it changes the physics of daily life.
And the community's response has had to adapt to that new physics. Which brings us to this orange whistle system. This detail really, really stood out to me.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's so low-tech, but that's precisely the point.
Can you explain how it works?
Well, you have to think electronic surveillance can be tracked, right? Text messages can be intercepted. A whistle is analog. It's simple. The reporting we're drawing from profiles a resident named Jack Kovarik who lives in South Minneapolis.
And Jack is part of a network?
A neighborhood network, yes. It's 6:15 a.m. And you have to remember, in January, in Minnesota, 6:10 a.m. is pitch black and freezing cold. Jack and others are out on the street corners.
At 6:15 in the morning. Wow.
They're acting as sentries. They're watching for the convoys of unmarked SUVs that usually roll out from the federal staging areas right around that time.
And the protocol is just blow the whistle if you see them.
It's that simple. If you see the agents, you blow the orange whistle. And the thing is, sound travels exceptionally well in that cold, dense air.
So the next corner hears it.
The next corner hears it, they blow their whistle. The next one hears that. It creates this localized acoustic early warning system.
It's like a chain reaction.
Exactly. And it alerts everyone in the neighborhood, whether they're undocumented immigrants, or maybe they're mixed status families, or even just citizens who don't want to get caught up in a checkpoint. It tells them that the surge is on their block. Time to stay inside.
It reminds me of those old air raid wardens in London during the Blitz.
Or the civil defense drills from the 50s.
Right. But here, the threat that's being signaled isn't some foreign bomber. It's the United States federal government.
And that creates a very specific and very corrosive psychological environment. You are living in a zone of constant vigilance, of constant low-grade fear.
And that stress, it just trickles down into every single aspect of life. I mean, look at the schools.
The schools are a perfect example. This part of the reporting is just heartbreaking.
Minneapolis public schools actually had to close or switch to remote learning. And it wasn't because of a snow day.
No, they closed because federal agents used chemical irritants, we're talking tear gas, pepper spray, during a student walkout that was happening near Roosevelt High School.
So the air itself wasn't safe for the kids.
The school district couldn't guarantee the air quality inside the classrooms. Think about that. They had to shut down because the federal government made the air unbreathable for children.
And even when the schools are technically open, the classrooms are empty.
They are. We've got this profile of an early childhood educator. She's referred to as Kate. And she says her attendance has just plummeted because the parents, many of whom are immigrants, are simply too terrified to leave their apartments to walk their kids to school.
The risk is too high.
The risk of being scooped up in a random sweep is too high. So Kate has had to pivot from being a teacher to, well, to being a logistics officer for a humanitarian crisis.
This is the sticky note system, right?
Yes, the sticky note system. She has a wall in her apartment covered in sticky notes, and they're all color-coded. Pink means a family needs diapers. Yellow is for formula. Green is for food.
So she's tracking which of her families are effectively trapped in their homes and what supplies they need to survive.
And then she coordinates drop-offs with a network of volunteers. She's become a one-woman social service agency.
There was this one image in the article that it was so vivid. She's doing her laundry at the end of a long week, and she realizes she forgot to take a bunch of the pink sticky notes out of her pocket.
And all of her clothes come out of the wash, dyed this faint rose color.
It's such a powerful metaphor, isn't it? You can't wash the crisis off. It stains everything. You try to go home, you try to decompress, but your laundry is literally pink because your students need diapers and their parents can't go to Target without risking deportation.
It's pervasive. It touches every single part of life. Healthcare, for instance.
Right. The reports of agents being inside Hennepin County Medical Center?
Inside the hospital, which is supposed to be a safe zone. We're reading reports of pregnant women missing their prenatal appointments because they are too afraid to go to the hospital.
Which is incredibly dangerous for both the mother and the baby.
Of course. And in response, there are these community calls for midwives to start facilitating home births because the hospital is no longer seen as a safe place.
People are choosing the risks of a home birth over the risk of encountering an ICE agent.
That's the choice they're being forced to make. And then there's the economic impact, which is just catastrophic.
I saw the numbers on this. It's staggering.
The data we're looking at shows that 80% of immigrant-run businesses in Minneapolis and St. Paul have had to close their doors.
80%. That's an economic depression level event for that entire sector of the economy.
It is. Lake Street, which for anyone who knows Minneapolis is the absolute heart of the Latino and Somali commercial life in the city, is described in the reporting as a ghost town.
So all the little Mexican restaurants, the halal markets.
Shuttered, boarded up. But it's interesting to see the businesses that have managed to stay open. They're engaging in what some sociologists might call commercial civil disobedience.
This is the coffee shop rebellion I read about.
Exactly. You walk up to a coffee shop or a bookstore, and there's a professionally printed sign on the door. Federal agents are not permitted on these premises. We do not consent to searches.
So they're using private property rights as a shield against federal intrusion.
It's a way of reclaiming some small zone of safety, a small pocket of defiance.
And then you have individuals like Juan Leon. I love this guy's story. The owner of Leo's Towing.
Juan Leon is an absolute hero in this whole narrative. He runs a small tow truck company. And he started to notice that after these early morning raids, there were just cars left abandoned.
Because the drivers had been arrested.
Arrested or had fled on foot. So the cars are just left in the middle of the street, or they're buried in snowbanks. So he starts patrolling the neighborhoods on his own. He finds these abandoned cars, he digs them out of the snow.
And he tows them.
He tows them to safe lots.
Yeah.
And he's doing it for free or at a very deep discount for the families of the victims.
It's an alternate infrastructure. It's like a shadow government almost.
It is. The official government isn't functioning to protect these people, so the tow truck driver and the kindergarten teacher are stepping in to build a new safety net from scratch.
It shows the incredible resilience of the city.
It does. But that resilience can only go so far when you introduce lethal force into the equation. And that brings us to the moment when everything changed. The flashpoint.
January 7th, 2026.
The day Renée Good was killed.
Renée Good, let's be clear about who she was, 37 years old.
A U.S. citizen, born and raised in Minnesota.
Okay, this is where we need to get very forensic, because the official narrative and the evidence on the ground are in direct conflict. Let's start with the official line. What does the Department of Homeland Security say happened?
The DHS report and the statements from the administration claim that the agent involved, Jonathan Ross, fired his weapon in self-defense.
Their argument is that Renée Good was using her vehicle as a weapon.
That's the core of their claim. They allege that she drove her car directly towards the agent, putting his life in what they call imminent danger, and that this justified the use of lethal force.
Okay, imminent danger. That is the key legal standard. If a car is barreling towards you, an officer is generally authorized to use lethal force to stop that threat.
That's the textbook justification, yes.
But does the video evidence support that textbook case?
No, and this is crucial. The video evidence, which comes from multiple bystander cell phones and has been analyzed by independent experts referenced in our source material, it contradicts that claim significantly.
What does the video show?
The footage shows that the agents conducted a very aggressive stop on her vehicle. They used unmarked cars to box her in. Weapons were drawn almost immediately. But the critical moment, the moment that matters legally, is the direction of her vehicle when the shots were actually fired.
And where was the car going?
The forensic analysis of the video shows that the front wheels of her car were turned away from the agent. The car appears to be accelerating away from the encounter.
So she wasn't driving at him, she was trying to flee.
It appears to be a classic panic flight response. She was trying to get away from these armed, masked men who had just surrounded her car.
And if the car is moving away from the agent, the imminent threat argument completely collapses, doesn't it?
Legally, yes. It becomes incredibly difficult to argue self-defense against a threat that is actively retreating. But here is the friction point, the thing that really enraged the city. Agent Jonathan Ross was not arrested.
He wasn't charged. He wasn't even taken into custody.
Nothing. And this is where we get into this concept of federal supremacy that I hear people asking about.
Explain that. Why wasn't he arrested? I mean, if a local guy in Minneapolis shoots someone and the video shows the victim was driving away, the Minneapolis PD arrests him that night, why is Agent Ross different?
This goes back to the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution, and specifically a legal doctrine that comes from an old Supreme Court case called In re Negal. The basic principle is that federal officers have a kind of immunity from state and local prosecution for acts they commit in the performance of their duties.
So if Agent Ross just says, I was doing my job.
Then the local Hennepin County prosecutor can't easily touch him. The entire process has to go through the federal system. The Department of Justice has to either waive that immunity or decide to bring federal charges themselves.
So the local authorities are completely powerless to prosecute a homicide that happened on their own streets just because the shooter has a federal badge?
That's essentially correct. And the current Department of Justice has made it abundantly clear that they are backing Operation Metro Surge 100%. So from the perspective of the people in Minneapolis, it looked like absolute, total impunity.
A U.S. citizen was killed on camera. The video seems to contradict the shooter's story, and that shooter is still on the job, still carrying a gun.
And that feeling of injustice, that rage, is what directly led to the events of January 23rd.
The general strike.
The Day of Truth and Freedom, as the organizers called it. And we have to be clear, this was not just another protest. This was the first general strike in the United States in 80 years, since the 1940s.
And again, we have to talk about the weather. It was, what, 20 below zero that day?
Negative 29 Celsius. I mean, that is dangerously cold. It's the kind of cold where exposed skin can get frostbite in minutes.
And yet, tens of thousands of people turned out.
Tens of thousands. You had the big labor unions, the Teamsters, the nurses union, the teachers union. They all walked off the job in solidarity. And you had the faith leaders.
The arrests at the airport were a really striking image. You had a Methodist reverend and a rabbi getting arrested side by side.
They were kneeling in prayer at Terminal 1, blocking the entrance.
When you see clergy members choosing to be arrested, it signals a profound moral shift in the conflict. It takes the argument out of the realm of law and order and moves it squarely into right and wrong.
But the political response from the White House wasn't, okay, let's sit down and talk. It was pure escalation.
Massive, calculated escalation. Vice President J.D. Vance flew into Minneapolis the day before the strike.
He didn't meet with the protesters or the community leaders?
No. He held a press conference where he essentially blamed the locals for the chaos. His argument, and I'm paraphrasing the sentiment here, was, this chaos is happening because the mayor and the governor refuse to cooperate with us. He demanded that they meet us halfway.
Which implies that an offer to meet was even made. But the local police chief said they had no idea he was even coming to town. That's right. The police chiefs of both Minneapolis and St. Paul are on the record saying they received 0 requests for coordination from the vice president's office. They were completely blindsided.
So it was just political theater.
It was designed to create a narrative for a national audience that the local Democratic-run city was the source of the problem.
And then, on top of that, you have President Trump's rhetoric,
which was pouring gasoline on the fire. In a December cabinet meeting, he was reported to have referred to Somali immigrants as garbage. He threatened to strip naturalized citizens of their status, which is legally almost impossible, but absolutely terrifying to hear if you're a naturalized citizen.
And he dropped the biggest threat of all, the Insurrection Act.
The Insurrection Act. We hear that term thrown around, but it's important to understand what it actually means.
Explain it for us. What does it allow a president to do?
The Insurrection Act of 1807 allows the president to deploy active-duty U.S. military troops, the Army, the Marines, onto American soil to suppress civil disorder, insurrection, or rebellion. It's a massive exception to the Posse Comitatus Act, which normally forbids using the military for domestic law enforcement.
So he was literally threatening to send the 82nd Airborne to patrol the streets of Minneapolis.
That is the threat. And that threat, that ratcheting up of tension, sets the stage for the next tragedy. Because the city is a tinderbox, the strike happens on January 23rd, and the very next day, January 24th, Alex Preddy is killed.
This is the incident that it really keeps me up at night, because the details here are so granular, they are so heavily contested, and they matter enormously. Let's start by profiling Alex Preddy. Who was he?
Alex Preddy, 37 years old. He was a registered nurse at the VA hospital in Minneapolis.
So a federal employee himself, in a sense.
In a sense, yes. He was a U.S. citizen, born in Illinois, grew up in Wisconsin, no criminal record, apart from a minor traffic issue years ago. And this is a crucial detail. Yeah. He was a licensed gun owner with a permit to carry a concealed weapon.
So by the traditional definition used by many, he was a good guy with a gun.
By every single metric that the gun rights lobby usually defends and promotes, yes. He was a law-abiding, licensed, employed citizen.
So take us to the scene, Nicollet Avenue. What was the situation?
The situation, by all accounts, was chaotic. A team of federal agents were pursuing a delivery driver named Jose Huerta Chuma. He apparently panics and hides inside a donut shop.
Okay.
The agents are outside the shop creating a scene. Alex Purdy's across the street. And according to witnesses, he's doing two things. First, he's filming the agents with his cell phone, which is his First Amendment right.
And second?
He's helping to direct traffic because the agents' unmarked SUVs are blocking the road and creating a hazard for other drivers.
So he's basically being an engaged citizen. He's documenting public servants in public and helping to maintain public safety.
Precisely. Then, an agent forcefully pushes a female bystander who was also on the sidewalk. At that point, Purdy steps forward to verbally intervene.
And this is the exact moment where the two narratives diverge completely. The administration, and specifically Stephen Miller in his press conferences, came out swinging.
They immediately labeled Purdy a domestic terrorist. They put out a statement saying he wanted to massacre law enforcement.
Massacre. That's an incredibly loaded word. It implies he had a weapon out and was actively shooting at them.
That's the image they wanted to paint, that he was an active shooter.
But again, the video.
Again, the video tells a different story. The BBC, Reuters, the New York Times, they've all done meticulous frame-by-frame forensic analysis of multiple bystander videos. And the sequence of events they have independently established is chilling.
Walk us through that sequence.
Okay. Frame 1. A group of agents tackles Alex Purdy. Frame 2. Purdy hits the ground. His hands are visible. In one hand, he is holding his cell phone.
His phone, not a gun.
His phone. Frame 3. Multiple agents are on top of him, pinning him to the pavement. Frame 4. An agent reaches to Purdy's right hip and removes his holstered firearm. You can see the gun slide across the pavement, away from Purdy's body.
So he is completely disarmed. The weapon is no longer in his possession or even within his reach.
He is disarmed. He is prone on the ground. He is pinned down by several agents. And then frame 5. 5 full seconds after the gun has been removed and is lying on the pavement. 10 shots are fired into his body.
They shot him 10 times after they had already taken his gun away.
That is what the visual evidence, as analyzed by multiple major news organizations, indicates. 10 shots in about 5 seconds.
I'm trying to think of a legal justification for that, and I just can't. There's no legal universe where that constitutes self-defense, is there?
It is extremely, extremely difficult to construct one. If your subject is disarmed and fully immobilized, the threat has been neutralized. To fire 10 rounds at that point? Well, local officials aren't mincing their words. They're calling it an extrajudicial killing, an execution.
And the immediate aftermath of the shooting was just as horrifying. There was a doctor on the scene, an eyewitness.
Yes, a physician. She was nearby when it happened. She tried to rush in to render medical aid to do her job, and she testified in a sworn affidavit that the federal agents physically blocked her from reaching Purdy's body.
They wouldn't let a doctor help a dying man.
Her quote is one of the most chilling things I've read in all this source material. She said the agents appeared to be counting bullet holes rather than performing CPR.
Counting bullet holes, it's so dehumanizing. It treats him like a target on a practice range, not a dying human being.
It suggests a complete and total detachment. And then, immediately after that, you have the institutional clash. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the BCA, arrives on scene.
These are the state's top investigators, right? The equivalent of the state police detectives.
Yes, they are the agency that investigates all police shootings in Minnesota. They show up with a warrant signed by a state judge to secure and process the crime scene.
And the federal agents say, of course, come on in.
No. The federal agents physically blocked the state's top law enforcement officers from entering the crime scene perimeter. You had an armed standoff.
So armed federal agents facing off against armed state agents over a dead body and a crime scene.
This is the green-on-green scenario we hinted at earlier in microcosm. State authority versus federal authority, playing out with guns on their hips on Nicollet Avenue.
And it showed, I guess, that the federal forces were operating with what they believed was total impunity, a total disregard for state law and state authority.
That's certainly how it was perceived by local officials. And the cultural fallout from Purdy's death was immense. It was a national story in a way. Good's death wasn't, perhaps because of his background.
Right, and you have Bruce Springsteen writing a song about it.
Streets of Minneapolis? It was all over the radio within days. That brings a different kind of attention.
You also had that protest inside Palantir, the tech company.
Right, because their software is used by ICE for data analysis. So you had their own employees walking out, protesting their company's complicity in these operations.
And then the corporate world here in Minnesota really started to panic. Target, Best Buy, 3M, they put out that letter.
The CEO letter. About 60 CEOs of major Minnesota-based corporations signed it. They publicly urged de-escalation.
How was that received?
It was heavily criticized by activists for being too vague and weak, for not calling out the administration directly. But the fact that the business establishment felt the need to speak up at all shows you how destabilizing this had become. Stability is the foundation of commerce, and Minneapolis was fundamentally unstable.
So while this cultural and political war is playing out in the headlines, the legal war is quietly happening in the background. And this brings us to the ACLU lawsuit, Hussein et al. V. Noam.
This class action suit is so critical because it's where we get the details of the day-to-day reality. It moves beyond the two high-profile killings and exposes the alleged pattern of systemic illegality.
It's all about the Fourth Amendment, really. Unreasonable search and seizure.
Exactly. The core accusation is that this isn't about legitimate law enforcement, it's about racial profiling.
Yeah.
That agents are stopping people based on their race or ethnicity, not on reasonable suspicion of a crime.
And the stories from the plaintiffs themselves are just. They're bizarre and they are cruel. Let's talk about Mubashir Khalif Hussein.
Mubashir Hussein. He is a U.S. citizen of Somali descent. According to his sworn affidavit, he's just out getting lunch. Masked agents grab him, put him in a headlock. He says he's choking, he can't breathe.
He tells them he's a citizen.
He manages to pull out his U.S. passport card, a federally issued ID, to prove his citizenship.
And they see that and they let him go.
No, they ignore it completely. Instead, they insist on scanning his face with a mobile device.
The face scanning, this is the biometrics part of the operation.
This is the part that has privacy advocates terrified. The allegation is that they are building a massive biometric database of residents, including U.S. citizens, without warrants, without probable cause, just by using force and coercion on the street.
And after they scan his face, what happens?
They realize he is, in fact, a citizen. So they release him, but, and this is the part that shows pure malice, they don't release him where they found him. They drive him 7 miles away and dump him on the side of the road.
7 miles. In the middle of the Minnesota winter, without a coat.
Yes. He could have easily frozen to death. It's a classic rough ride tactic meant to punish and intimidate. And to add insult to injury, he was later pepper sprayed at a protest just for filming the same agents.
And then there's the story of Javier Doe, which reads almost like psychological warfare.
Javier Doe is a U.S. citizen. He's Latino. He works at a Target store. He was tackled by agents in the vestibule of the store on his way into work.
Just tackled, for no reason.
For no stated reason. They dragged him into an unmarked SUV. And while they're driving him around with no destination, the agents start blasting Mexican music on the stereo at full volume and driving erratically.
Why would they do that? What's the point?
It's mockery. It's a form of psychological torture. It's a way of saying, we don't care about your papers or your citizenship. We see you as Mexican, and we're going to treat you like a caricature. It's designed to disorient and humiliate.
How is he eventually released?
He says he was let go in a random Walmart parking lot because the agents got distracted. They saw another agent stopping and checking the ID of an Asian man, and they started laughing about it and just told him to get out of the car.
It sounds like they're treating it as some kind of grotesque game.
It suggests a profound breakdown in professional discipline. The allegation is that these agents are operating with zero oversight, and their worst biases are running wild.
And there was one more story that really stood out, said Osman.
He was dressed in traditional religious attire, a kufi and a thobe. Agents stopped him near a mosque. And according to his affidavit, they told him something very explicit.
What did they say?
They said, Trump is the president. This is what he wants.
Wow. That one quote just destroys the whole fraud investigation pretense completely.
It does. It confirms that for at least some of the agents on the street, this is not a bureaucratic mission. It is an ideological one. It is about asserting political and racial dominance over specific groups.
Okay, so we've covered the violence, the strikes, the lawsuits, but we need to zoom out now to the biggest, most dangerous picture, the Civil War scenario. You mentioned a simulation that was run back in 2024.
Yes, by the Center for Ethics and the Rule of Law, or CERL at the University of Pennsylvania. They ran a very sophisticated tabletop exercise, a war game, essentially, specifically designed to stress test the resilience of the U.S. Constitution under a rogue president.
And the scenario they game out sounds disturbingly familiar.
It is hauntingly similar to what's happening now. The scenario was this. A president carries out a deeply unpopular and legally questionable federal operation in a specific state. The governor of that state resists and refuses to comply. In response, the president federalizes the state's National Guard to force the issue.
And this leads to the risk of green-on-green conflict.
Green on green.
It's military slang for friendly fire. But in this specific context, it means U.S. forces fighting U.S. forces. You would have the Minnesota National Guard, loyal to the governor and the state, facing off against either federal troops like the Army or even their own fellow Guard members who have been put under federal command.
Is that actually possible? I mean, we know Governor Walz has placed the Minnesota National Guard on standby.
The pieces are on the board. The governor has the Guard on standby to protect state assets and citizens. And in response, the Pentagon has reportedly readied the 11th Airborne Division, about 1,500 troops, for potential deployment to Minneapolis.
And the problem is that the legal guardrails that are supposed to prevent this kind of scenario have been eroded, massively eroded. And you have to point to the Supreme Court's decision in Trump v. United States, the presidential immunity ruling.
Remind us what that ruling established.
It established that a president has absolute criminal immunity for any official acts taken while in office. So if the president gives an order to the 11th Airborne to clear the streets of Minneapolis, that is very likely to be considered an official act.
So even if the order is illegal or unconstitutional, he can't be prosecuted for giving it.
That is the interpretation that the current administration is operating under. It emboldens them. It completely removes the fear of future accountability, which is supposed to be a check on power.
And look at what the Department of Justice is doing right now. Are they investigating the killing of Renée Good or Alex Preddy?
No, they are not. Instead, they have opened an investigation into Governor Walz and the mayor of Minneapolis for conspiracy to impede federal agents.
That is a complete and total inversion of justice. They aren't investigating the homicides. They're investigating the local officials who are trying to stop the federal operation.
It's a weaponization of the legal system itself, turning it against the state government.
So, getting back to the simulation, one of its key findings was that in a crisis like this, the courts would be too slow to stop it.
That was the terrifying conclusion. In a fast-moving crisis, where shots are being fired and troops are on the move, a court injunction might take days to work its way through the system. A bullet takes milliseconds. The simulation concluded that once the shooting starts, the law is effectively powerless to stop it in the moment.
So what does stop it?
The soldiers.
The human element again.
Ultimately, the Searle simulation found that the only thing standing between an armed standoff and a potential massacre is the conscience of the individual commanders and the individual soldiers on the ground.
Because they swear an oath to the Constitution, not to the president.
That's right. The oath is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. But here's the impossible dilemma. When the president is the one giving the order, and he and his lawyers claim the order is constitutional, that soldier is put in an impossible position. Who do you obey? The commander-in-chief. Or your own understanding of the Constitution.
That brings us to the final thought for today. We've covered a lot. The orange whistles, Kate's pink sticky notes, the 10 shots on Nicollet Avenue. But the thing I keep coming back to is the idea of citizenship.
How do you mean?
Well, we grew up in this country believing that a U.S. passport is like a golden ticket. It's a shield. It grants you rights and protections. But Renée Good was a citizen. Alex Preddy was a citizen. Mubashir Hussain showed them his official passport card, and they put him in a headlock anyway.
It forces us to ask a very, very uncomfortable question about what that document actually means now.
Right. If this breakdown of federalism, this conflict is happening here, does that piece of paper even matter anymore? If a U.S. passport can't protect you from a federal agent in a Minneapolis parking lot, what is the actual value of that document in 2026 America? Is it still a shield? Or has it just become a souvenir from a country that doesn't exist the way we thought it did?
That is the question being answered on the streets of Minneapolis right now.
We are going to keep watching this story as it develops. Stay safe out there. Thanks for listening to